palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. In the palms join. With palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for showing up on this Tuesday evening. All the wonderful things to do here in San Diego, and somehow y'all were crazy enough to come here. So appreciate you being here. This journey that you're on, whether it's day one for you here, or whether you've been at this for 20 years with meditation, with practice, whatever your spiritual kind of world is, it's not easy. And it requires a tremendous amount of effort. And very often we approach our spiritual practice, or whatever it might be, with this kind of like, it's a cool thing to do. Welcome to America 2023, right? What's the next coolest, hippest, trendiest thing that we can get involved in? And that mindset, that approach, if you really break it down, is what led us all to this place to begin with. Is we're just following some path that other people have set. And this practice really is about waking up first and foremost to why do you suffer? And understanding that your discomfort, your angst, your dissatisfaction, your difficulties, your challenges, your struggles have nothing to do with anyone or anything else. It has everything to do with you and your life. This is the first thing that we want to explore and look at when it comes to this path and this practice. And if you can't honestly look at this, then Buddhist practice is going to be really difficult for you. It really is. It's not this gentle, feel good, let's all hug and, hang out and drink funny spiritual drinks and throw names around that we don't even understand and say things in other languages and then all hug each other and say namaste, right? That's not this practice. This practice is a very genuine, authentic reflection back on yourself to explore, as the Buddha taught very honestly and openly, where is your greed? Where is your anger? And where is your ignorance? This is where it begins. And when we can explore very honestly and openly our own levels of greed, our own levels of anger, and our own levels of ignorance, then we can begin to cut through some of that, as the Buddha called it, dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. But until we can honestly look at it, this practice is going to be difficult. And in fact, if you can't honestly look at it, what you're doing isn't even this practice. It's just getting lost in a movie, right? When you see spiritual practice, I don't care if it's here or, yoga or whatever you go to, if you just see it as like some event outside of your daily life, then you're missing the purpose of this practice. It doesn't matter who is leading. It doesn't matter where you are. The practice is to begin to explore what's really going on in my heart and mind. And when you can do that, it's not about religion. It's not about spirituality. It's not about languages or cultures. It's not about anything else other than your own attachment and sense of self and ego. This is where it begins. And that's why it's so much fun. Because you get to actually look at yourself honestly. And when you can do that, your life will change drastically. Otherwise, you're just kind of caught in this, illusion, I call it this kind of facade of Buddhist practice. Chogyam Trungpa called it spiritual materialism. And we want to be very careful with all of that because it's really easy to get lost in that world of pretend. This practice brings it back to the present moment. Here I am. I'm absolutely 100% responsible for my misery and my suffering. And the beauty of that means I'm absolutely 100% responsible for my happiness and my joy and things that I like about life. And nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can control that. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. I am 100% in control of my perception. And when I say I am, what I mean by that is the intention, right? For those who don't know me, I'm not trying to sound like I am 100% evolved. Right? I'm about 2% evolved. And the rest 98% is a big freaking mess right up here. But I can look at it honestly and say this is where the work begins. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. Feel free to say hello as you are. For those who are sitting for the first time or maybe here for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. A mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice when you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are in a cushion, often it helps sliding to the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, same thing. Just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. You're not here to kick back and fall asleep. You could have stayed home and done that. Hands can be on the knees, in the lap, whatever is comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts or you have an itch. So simply move and return to stillness. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. Starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, Settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get every single day. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation isn't going to fix that. It's simply going to make you become aware why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess. So you can then begin to make changes in your life. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's not a business. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and every single person you encounter every moment of your life. That's why it's so easy. You just have to roam around and be nice to people all day long, which I'm sure you're all so good at. No sarcasm there at all. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. Like I said, it's a practice. It takes time. And it starts with looking at yourself honestly. So with that, for me, I'll pause. I always really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And again, to those joining virtually, welcome. Thanks for being here. Feel free to, if you have any questions, put them on the chat box there. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. So.
If meditation is something special and we shouldn't have any expectation from it, then how do we stay encouraged to continue practicing?
Yeah. So the question was, for those who didn't hear it, if meditation isn't anything special and we're not supposed to expect anything from it, then how should we stay encouraged, right? I just repeat questions for those who didn't hear it or for those virtually. Yeah, it's really, it addresses something that we as these beings have become accustomed and addicted to, which is instant gratification and feedback from something. And there's a causal relationship. That's what karma is, a lot of cause and effect. And there's this causal relationship that says, I did something, I want something. Right? I mean, you ever rolled through like a Starbucks drive-through and ordered a Starbucks and then just left? It would kind of be like that. Try that once in a while. Without expecting anything. You know? Just leave. I mean, that would be kind of rude to the people who are there, but you get my point. With meditation, specifically, it's really important to understand that where you will begin to see benefits, changes, are not from the meditation itself. It's outside of meditation. It's easy here, right? Easier, I should say, right? Everybody's quiet, you know. They're sitting, they're smiling, they're, being nice. Nobody's yelling at you right now, except for me, right? Nobody like threw shit at you when you walked in the door. It's much easier here. But so what if you can sit here for 20 minutes silently and quietly and work on your breathing techniques or whatever you're all doing during the 20 minutes, right? If the moment you walk outside the door and you start driving home, somebody's going to cut you off on the freeway. And how are you going to respond? Because that world out there is going 1,000 miles an hour. And they don't care that you just finished your meditation or that you're leaving your little Buddhist place, right? They're on their way to do whatever they got to do. So that's the first part, is to understand that for me, when I say don't expect anything from this practice and it's not some magical thing, it's really to cut through, especially for people who are maybe brand new to this stuff, it's to cut through this idea that you've been like, you've been on Google, you watched a bunch of movies, you read about the 60s, and you're like, all right, when's it going to happen for me? It's just sitting and breathing. That in and of itself is a magical, beautiful experience with all the craziness. So that's the first part, right? But to understand how to stay motivated is really what you're asking. When you don't always see immediate results from this hours and hours and hours of sitting. You're like, when is this stuff going to work? Right? Or you've been at it for 3 years and you're like, man, this stuff doesn't work. I got stuff to do. I don't have time to sit and do nothing. Just stay at it. Stay at it because as far as motivation, the alternative is no good. Right? Once you start a practice and you know this, the alternative is no good. So be patient, right? Buddhist teachings on patience, and be diligent. My suggestion for you is to stay motivated by knowing that if you stop, it's going to get worse. That make sense? It's the danger of getting to know people a little bit and you figure out how to actually give them some response that might help them versus confusing them, which is what I really prefer to do. So, yeah, alternative is worse. Stay motivated. What else?
Can you explain how dependent origination is?
Sure. So the question is, can I explain how dependent origination is? Let me just sum up the entire basis of the Buddhist awakening for you in 2 minutes or less. So everything is contingent upon something else for its existence. All of the Buddhist teachings begin with the understanding of dependent origination. So karma, often people think karma is what goes around comes around. That is the worst translation of the word karma. It's like, welcome to the West. We're just going to want bad to happen to bad people, and well, that's their karma. They got that coming to them. Karma literally means action or deeds, and it is the law of cause and effect. So what it means is, and I'll come back to your question, but it ties in. You can't really look at dependent origination without having a deep understanding of what karma is. And so karma is like if you go to play pool, right? You hit the cue ball into the rack. Cue ball hits the rack every time the ball is going to a different direction. Our entire life, we are that cue ball. We think very often like, oh, I'm going to do good, so good's going to happen. We all know that's not the case. We've done good, bad happens. We've done bad, and you know what? Yeah, I got good stuff. So we get pulled either way. But to understand that our life, as the Buddha taught, karma is generated 3 ways: body, speech, and mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. So everything we think, everything we say, everything we do has an impact. And just like that cue ball, every person, place, and thing that we encounter, we are creating a karmic dynamic, karmic relationship with the law of cause and effect, right? Dependent, does that make sense so far? You've heard me say this 1,000 times. The law of karma, it doesn't change, it's just the way things are. Now, understanding dependent origination is understanding the causal relationship of all phenomena. So, the only reason I'm speaking right now to this is because you asked this question. The only reason you asked this question is because you walked in those doors 30 minutes ago or whatever. The only reason you walked in those doors 30 minutes ago or whatever is because in 1926, they decided to build this building. The only reason they decided to build this building in 1926 is because 200 years earlier, Emanuel Swedenborg was a Christian mystic and said, I've got a spiritual practice for you all. And it became called Swedenborgian, blah, blah, blah. Right? I don't mean that disrespectful. And so, can I understand that the only reason I'm speaking right now is because of Emanuel Swedenborg, who lived 250 years ago? That's the only reason this dynamic is taking place. And then go back from there. It is endless. Dependent origination is understanding the causal relationship of every single thing in the universe. That's why it's so easy. Right? But to bring it to a practical level, right? It's important to understand that forget about this kind of grand, 250-year ago thing. Anyone been angry at somebody recently? Right? Only 2 of you, right? So when you're angry at somebody, do you think the person that you're angry at also is struggling, facing challenges, difficulties, suffering? What is their karma? Meaning, what is their dynamic? What is their situation? What is their law of cause and effect going on in their lives? When someone does something that harms us, we often just think about me. How dare you harm me? Do we ever stop for a second to think, maybe they've been harmed deeply? And because they have been harmed deeply, they are now doing things that I am responding to that creates a feeling of harm. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't justify what anyone does, just like when we do things that harm others. It's not justified. But understanding where it's coming from is really important. And if you bring dependent origination into every situation in your life, every encounter with a family member, loved one, relationship, stranger, whatever it might be, if you bring dependent origination into every single dynamic you ever approach, you'll remove so much of your sense of ego and self and pride. Because let's be honest, most of us roam around thinking all day long about who first? Me, I am number one. And it is with that view, you look at the Eightfold Path, having the correct view. I'll tell you what's not the correct view is thinking that you're the most important person in the universe. So, dependent origination, it's just an endless causal relationship with all phenomena.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's a comment here that says, it's so hard to think that way when they are your neighbors. Yeah, I get it. I mean, but your neighbors have maybe they don't like you. Maybe you're too quiet for them. Maybe your silence is disrupting their noise. I don't even know what you're referring to. I'm just, everyone complains about noisy neighbors. It comes up like once every other week. Maybe your silence is disturbing their noise. But we just think about us. I want silence, We just think about us. So, and you're and again, it's just one sentence in text, so I have no idea how much sarcasm or is in here, but it's so hard to think that way when they are your neighbors. It's actually not that hard to think that way when they are your neighbors. It's very easy to think that way when they are your neighbors. You just can't do it. Just because you can't do something doesn't mean it's difficult. It means you're stuck on yourself thinking you're most important. So that's really hard for us to sit with. I warned you at the beginning. What else? Questions? Yeah.
You know the story of the double arrow?
Yeah.
I recognize in myself today, like if I start off having a day that I have negative emotions or things that are coming up and I'm upset, I will intentionally, if I know I have other things that I'm supposed to do that are gonna cause those same negative or whatever emotions, I'll pile them all on at once. It's almost like self-sabotage where I'm like, let me just do all of the things that are gonna cause me pain in one day so that I just get it over with. And I don't know how, and I was thinking about this today, and I was like, it's like I'm trying to make logic out of it by saying well, it's gonna cause me pain in the future, so I might as well just be really upset today versus having lots of days with a little bit of upsetness.
Yeah.
How do you?
It's actually not a bad strategy. It's good advice for us all. I'm pretty sure the Buddha would say, don't do that. I'm not one to quote him ever, but I'm pretty confident that he might say that's not a good idea. Just to paraphrase for those who virtually didn't hear it, what you're saying is that when you're having a bad day, the teaching of the second arrow, which I'll touch on in a minute, but when you're having a bad day, you notice you're having a bad day, and then you look at all the other stuff you have to do that might also cause a bad day. So instead of delaying it all, you just throw it all into one big, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And my initial reaction is that's brilliant, but there's probably some wisdom in there that I may come up with to say don't do that. And for those who aren't familiar with the teaching on the second arrow, very briefly, the Buddha's teachings around that is that, look, when you have something that happens and you feel angry, for example, okay, just sit with the anger. Just be angry. But what often happens when we're angry is we're angry, now we're sad. So now we're sad and we're angry. Now we get depressed because we're sad because we're angry. Now we're angry, sad, and depressed, so we might as well just be anxious because, And so from one simple emotion of anger that will pass, we've now added on 8 other emotions and reactions, and these are the additional arrows. So often people say, the second arrow, the teaching of the second arrow, or multiple arrows. So I think what resonates with me that I would maybe suggest as a practice is really is a question, why just jump to assuming that all those other things are just going to be miserable? Right? The practice is to recognize that, sure, you wake up, maybe you're having a bad morning, something doesn't go well, but it's almost then like you're just kind of throwing in the towel and saying, well, the entire day is going to be miserable from this one thing that happened early in the morning. So I'm just going to pile it all on and just chalk it up as a terrible day. Right? When the reality is, maybe you could work through that initial arrow to where it's not so miserable. And the other things that you're piling on to turn your miserable day into a very miserable day, maybe could be not so bad at all. But it sounds to me like there's almost I hate to say like a giving up, but that's just what I keep sitting with. It's almost like you're just giving up on the day and you're like, well, today's going to suck because it's 10 a.m. and I'm already pissed off at customer service and my coffee wasn't made properly. So the whole day is ruined. I would work through that first before piling on a bunch of other stuff that's just going to prolong the miserable day. And really the practice is to understand with that first arrow, whatever it might be, is to understand what is the cause of this. And as we know from Buddhist teachings, the second noble truth, the cause of suffering is greed, anger, ignorance. So when that first thing happens, instead of just like running to grab all the terrible things waiting for you, just sit with the first thing for a minute and just kind of ask yourself, where's my greed, where's my anger, where's my ignorance? Can I see through these with generosity, compassion, and wisdom, and maybe transform this first arrow into something pleasant? Because you can.
After like the second and third thing in the morning, do you have any like, other than like meditating, sitting and breathing, are there any other?
Meditating and sitting and breathing at that time is not going to help you.
That's what I mean, is there?
You're just going to sit in your anger.
That's what I'm trying to like think of how to like catch it before it.
What I'm suggesting, and let me just add to that, sitting with your anger is not bad, because if you're just sitting with your anger, what does that mean you're not doing? Anything else, acting on it. So sitting with it can be very important, right? Even though you're just sitting in anger. But when the first thing happens, just pause there and ask yourself, why am I angry right now? Before you go to the second, third, or fourth thing. That's what I'm saying. You're not. It sounds like, from especially the way you just asked the second question, that you're not really sitting with the first thing long enough. You're just kind of chalking that up and be like, well, that's done. I'm angry now. Bring it on. No, sit with the first thing before you go do anything else. I mean, unless obviously, you have to go somewhere, but I would sit with it longer and see the impermanence of it. Then it'll change. And in all likelihood, whatever that first thing is you're angry about that morning, an hour from now, 5 hours from now, the next day, ain't gonna matter. But at that moment, it's just hell. So, yeah. What else? Yeah.
What's your take on situational misery? For example, there are some unavoidable situations that you know will inevitably be miserable, like finding parking somewhere, or that reoccurring meeting that you know is just really going to be pear-shaped. Do you feel like you need to go into it with just like less expectation and less ego, or how do you?
You've been here for the 40 minutes I've been talking, right? What do you think I'm going to say to the question, should I go into it with less expectations and less ego? What do you think the answer to that would be?
Yes.
Yes. 100%. In fact, you should go into everything you do with less.
Third answer.
Say again?
So for a third answer, but it's not.
I know you're hoping for a third answer. That's another expectation that's not going to be met. Expectations. My master always said, learn to expect nothing from anyone ever. I'm not saying that's easy to do. I'm saying that's what I was taught. And if you go into a situation, I mean, I love the way you phrase situational suffering or situational misery, right? Misery. But if you go into any situation, the practice of meditation and the art of being present is to show up at something, that meeting, as if you've never been there before. You refer to it as the recurring meeting that you clearly look forward to. And every week, that recurring meeting is like this miserable thing. What day of the week is that meeting?
It is today.
Today. What time?
It was at 9 a.m.
9 a.m. So here we are, 10 hours later, and you're still thinking. Well, yeah, I mean, you're still thinking about that meeting, the miserable meeting, and now you got a whole 7 days left till the next one. So here's my suggestion. Each week, and I'm going to hope you can all pull, I don't want to say that a miserable meeting isn't the end of the world, but let's look at relationships that we're holding grudges, loved ones that we can't forgive from 15 years ago, arguments we had from a year ago that we still won't set down. We are carrying so much around with us, right? And the idea of learning to be present with a meditation practice means you're not carrying things with you your whole life. So you're showing up, and this is, the book literally is called Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, but you're showing up with the beginner's mind. You're going into that meeting as if you've never been there before. I'm not suggesting this is easy, but you're going to spend the next 6 days dreading that meeting. And how long have you had these meetings? 6 months, 6 years? How long?
3 months.
3 months, okay? And so for 3 months, you have hated your Tuesday morning 9 a.m. meeting. And how many people, I don't need a number here, but since you're asking about it, I'm guessing a lot, have you told about how much you hate your Tuesday morning 9 a.m. meeting? Everybody gets to hear about it, you get to post about it, you get to share about it. It's just on repeat. What's on repeat isn't the meeting, it's the story in your head about the meeting. How long is the meeting? An hour? It's a one.
It's an hour.
You hope it's an hour. Again, my suggestion is to change the dialogue. First round, it's an hour. From 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm going to show up like I've never been here before. And I'm going to stop judging everyone on the call and everything on the call. And I'm going to be present, because that's why I practice meditation, to learn to be present with life as it arises. This is just a weekly meeting. Now look at things in your life that really matter. Okay? That's when it's really difficult. Now, situational, I want to come back to the parking and the situational misery and all that kind of stuff. It's not situational, it's your entire life, my friend. What's your name?
Zach.
Zach, it's your entire life. The first thing the Buddha said is life is filled with suffering. Doesn't mean all of life sucks. It doesn't mean your whole life is going to be miserable. It means you're going to experience a lot of suffering in your life. It's not situational. It's every day. And why does suffering occur? You said it in your question to me. It's because you expect things to be a certain way. Ever expected anyone to be a certain way? Or a place or a thing? Drop expectations, and your life will drastically change. And you'll learn to be present with things as they arise. And you'll learn to not carry around year after year after year. And again, this is only 3 months. Okay. The other thing is situational parking. When you can't find a place to park, you know what that means? Everybody else got a place to park. That's very kind of you. Don't you feel good knowing that all these people had a place to park? Not you, but everybody else did. So it's very generous of you. Let's all thank Zach for giving us a place to park. Thank you, Zach. Right? So it's just a matter of shifting your mindset away from what Zach needs and wants. And this will change your life. What else?
I think the answer, our response is in there somewhere, but what's kind of that I'm sitting with it is like I wanted to hear your thoughts on the difficulty of letting go of old beliefs, like negative thought patterns or just old negative beliefs or
Yeah.
So I just wanted to
Yeah. So the question is around thoughts on letting go of negative beliefs, or old beliefs, I should say. And then you get negative beliefs as an example. I would suggest not just, and then I'll, try to make this practical for you, but I would suggest practicing not just letting go of negative beliefs, but all beliefs. The beautiful thing about the Buddhist teachings is, and around how to practice Buddhism, for example, since this is Intro to Buddhism, The Buddha was very clear on don't believe him just because he said it. Have great faith, he wanted people to believe, because he wanted them to have faith in themselves. But also have great doubt in what he was teaching. If you doubt something, then you might test it out and try it and see if it works. If it works for you, then you stay with it. If it doesn't, then you abandon it. So really for me, looking at this idea of great faith and great doubt, holding on to beliefs, good or bad, can be potentially dangerous and detrimental. And ultimately, it's the same mind that is choosing to hold on to, say, a positive belief or negative belief. But yes, as you said, I think in your question, I didn't repeat it, but even similar to what I just said, is that if you're showing up to the present moments, then there are no past beliefs, good or bad. There's just you sitting there. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but I recognize that you're going to walk out of here and filter through your head the thousands of beliefs you have, some of them positive, some of them negative. So on a practical, does that make sense so far? I mean, just intellectually. So in a practical sense, this idea of moving beyond negative beliefs or I suggest first, not even looking at them as positive and negative, but maybe looking at them as harmful or beneficial past beliefs. And if you have past beliefs that are harmful to you or to others, regardless of what it is, right? And you can bring a sense of compassion to yourself and to others, then it'll be a little bit easier to, and I'm not a big fan at all of letting go, right? Because I think the phrase letting go is almost like as if it didn't happen. But think of it as just kind of setting down for a period of time some of the old beliefs you had that are harmful to you or others. Did those beliefs bring you joy or others joy? Did they bring you happiness or others happiness? Or did those old beliefs bring you suffering and others suffering? And if we can see them not so much from a judgment of good or bad, right or wrong, positive or negative, but what did these beliefs lead me to be or do? And we can recognize, if you're sitting here on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock that you want to change, which most people don't show up here unless they're really, really bored. If there isn't something about them that they're working on changing. So you're already in the process of it. And you're asking the question, which says you're far along the process. You're just not there yet. It's not that easy yet. But be patient with yourself. Be diligent, keep practicing, keep working on recognizing old beliefs that were harmful. I spent 30 years of my life with beliefs that were incredibly harmful and dangerous to self and others. Because I believed I was the most important person in the universe and everybody else should just, abide by that. Started there. Then everything trickled down. But keep working at it. That makes sense? Yeah, be patient. What else? Yeah, there was a comment back to the neighbors. Very spot on. Nocturnal, disruptive lifestyle of being up until 6 a.m. Clearly, not being up till 6 a.m. is disruptive to them. So I don't know what to tell you. What else? Questions, thoughts?
Okay, so we're talking about being present, and we're talking about kind of what brings you as you're present. And say you're with family or you're with your significant other, and you're very present, and then they start looking at their phone, or they look off in the distance, or they don't hear you, or you repeat yourself. Of course, you're like trying to just be like not attached to it or let that, the frustration get to you. So sometimes you are able to like look at the birds going by if they're on your phone or like eat your ice cream. And then sometimes you have the other side of you that's like, wait, but I'm present. Why aren't you present? So like,
You're not going to like my answer, but I'm going to say it anyways. Let me just rephrase the question. So your question was around being present, specifically with the significant other. And there you are, you're trying to be present, but they're not present. And they're on the phone or they're looking around and you're trying to be patient, practice non-attachment. But it's just not working, right? So they are being present. They're just not being present with you. And I mean that very honestly. They're being present. It's just not with you. And often, always, I say Buddhist practice doesn't make life easier initially. It makes things more challenging. It doesn't early on make relationships better, especially if they're struggling. It makes it harder because you begin to see these things. There would have been a time in your life probably where that significant other not being present with you wouldn't have maybe been a big deal because maybe you wouldn't have been present with them. Again, I'm just making this up, right? But now once being present and authentically, genuinely showing up to a relationship is important to you, and you're not seeing that in return, now you're aware of how unhealthy and toxic that is, and how detrimental that is to an actual real relationship. So you can't force somebody to be different from who and how they are. They are who and how they are. The question is, do we as individuals in a relationship, whether it's intimate romantic relationships, whether it's friendships, whatever it might be, do we want to continue on in that situation or not? And we have that choice. But all the presence in the world that you bring to a situation isn't going to heighten necessarily another person's presence. If anything, it's just going to make you hyper aware of how unpresent they are. And at some point in time, we may say, I don't want this. And then your entire life gets blown up. Or you spend your life with someone who is not present or doesn't make you the priority over the birds or the people or the phone. That's up to you. That's where this stuff gets hard. So, you can try telling them to develop a meditation practice to learn to stay present, but if someone doesn't want to hear it, that usually never goes over well, especially from a loved one. It usually just ends up in a fight, and then you're present with the fight. So, yeah, there's no, and you know me well enough to know there was no simple answer to that, but I think we've all been in situations in our lives where we wish other people were a certain way. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that we've also been the person in someone else's life that they wished, we were a certain way. Who knows? Maybe they wish you weren't so present all the time because that would just make it easier for them. Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you if that was helpful at all, but at least I can say that was the honest answer that I could give you at this moment. Yeah. So anything else? We'll do one more before we close. Or just close. Anyone? We good? The benefit of this practice is shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, so before y'all head out, we have a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host, Carol.
I am your Wendy host, Carol. Hi, I'm Carol, and we opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it. Then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you again.
Thank you, Carol.